Florence Steiner with the Robust Opposition. I'm here at the Hollywood Los Feliz Jewish Community Center, and we're about to do a fundraiser for Black Lives Matter LA and Justice LA. I've been spending a lot of time helping them gather signatures for their Reform LA Jails initiative, which is going to be on the ballot in 2020. So this event is going to feature a film on bail by Robert Greenwald from Brave New Films. I'm not going to be able to live stream the film, but you can find it on YouTube probably. And a keynote address from activist Jane Fonda, and a panel featuring several speakers, including Yvette Allais, who was on my show this past year talking about this bail reform bill, SB 10, which actually was just amended last week in a secretive process. 14 amendments were put on it that actually made it worse than bail. Even though they get rid of cash bail, there are all sorts of pre-trial risk assessment algorithms that could actually incarcerate more people, hold more people. Here we go.
I was told to come here and give a keynote address about bail reform, which of course I said yes to because I knew nothing about bail reform. And I knew that having to come here and talk about it would require me to do some research, and I always like that. And I thought I was going to be here, you know, to say, let's go support SB 10, Senate Bill 10, and then I found out now we're opposing SB 10. Yeah. But, so we're opposing it, right? Yeah. But bail reform is I didn't never realize how incredibly critical bail reform is. Let me just tell you some of the things that I've learned in the last month. 450,000 people in the United States are behind bars at any one time because they can't afford bail. Between 1992 and 2000, 43% increase in the amount of people who are incarcerated. And there's been a 95% increase in people behind bars since 2000, and we know who they are. They're people of color, they're gay people, lesbian people, trans people, disabled people. Studies show that people who have to stay in jail before their trial because they can't afford bail money tend to get sentenced more and tend to have longer sentences than people who are free before they come to trial. You know, keeping people in jail because they're poor is as random as keeping people in jail because they have blue eyes. And we have to remember that the American Constitution, the 8th Amendment, says bail shall not be excessive. That's in the Constitution. We know who keeps touting the Constitution. And I don't know if somebody following me is going to talk about why we are now opposed to Senate Bill 10, but just very briefly, you are, okay. You got it. Prevention detention. Right? You do away with the money, the bail part, and then you give the judges the right to decide very subjectively about who poses a risk and who doesn't, and using what are they called, assessment tools to determine who should be let out that we know are biased toward people of color. You're going to be talking about all that, right? And I don't know if you all know this, but I think it's important for us to understand in the big picture that Black and brown women and girls are the fastest growing prison population, representing 30% of all incarcerated women, although out of the world they represent 13% of all women in the United States. The growth of women of color who are incarcerated is 50% more than men who are being incarcerated. I think some of this is quite deliberate, because if you put the women away, then you are affecting their children, their families, the glue that holds it all together. That's what I love Black Lives Matter, because it's woman-led. I don't know all the details about the starting, I mean, I know why it started, but it wasn't until I began to receive flyers sent to activists telling them how they can take care of themselves. I said, there are no men running this race. Healing and taking care of yourself so you can be stronger for the struggle. That's what women do. So basically what we have to understand, and I'm sure that most of you do, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's important for white people to say this, that this incarceration of people of color is absolutely deliberate. It's a strategy to lock up and enslave people of color under the guise of war on drugs. And they can do this without ever being accused of racism. This strategy is said to be race neutral. If you haven't already, I urge you to read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, because that's what the mass incarceration is all about. The original Jim Crow was started to combat the gangs that black people in this country made after the Civil War, and the new Jim Crow, mass incarceration, was started after the gangs black people made during the Civil Rights Movement. It began in the 70s. Nixon was president. John Ehrlichman was Nixon's domestic policy advisor. And if you read Patrisse Culler's book, When They Call You a Terrorist, you will find out that Ehrlichman said, this is a direct quote, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be black, but by getting the public to associate blacks with heroin and then criminalizing them heavily, we could disrupt their communities. Did we know we were lying? Of course we did," unquote. I remember Nixon. People think it's cool to have been on Nixon's enemies list. It wasn't. But it was a lot better if you were white and famous and rich, I can tell you. And I was called a traitor. Nixon gave instructions to the State Department and the Justice Department to find ways that they could nail me for being a traitor. They weren't able to. But that didn't prevent them from continuing to break into my home, tap my phone, follow my children to school, break into my bank, get my records. That was the first time that the FBI had ever done that to an American citizen. But still, I'm white and I'm famous. You know, so it ended up okay. A lot of people ask me now, was it worse then or now? It's worse now. It's worse now. I'm going to veer a little bit off the topic of bail now. I love Greenpeace, and I was down in Long Beach on the Greenpeace Arctic, whatever the name is, it's the icebreaker that they use. And I was talking to Annie Leonard, who's the executive director of Greenpeace in North America. And she told me something that I didn't know. She said that there are laws being devised now in a number of states that would be labeled domestic terrorism if you do anything to protest or stop any kind of fossil fuel project, pipeline, whatever, fracking, or even plan to or talk to someone about doing it, you are deemed a domestic terrorist. I mean, talk about putting, trying, they're not going to succeed, but trying to put a damper on people's desire to be actively opposed to fossil fuel extraction. Greenpeace is facing $900 million lawsuit. They're using Greenpeace to try to silence activism. And then there's the current, right today, this week, new enemies list that Trump is pulling the security clearances of all these. I never thought I'd be rooting for the FBI. I mean, what is becoming? Did any of you watch John Brennan on Rachel Maddow last night? Powerful, right? John Brennan. Yes. And basically, what all these white guys in high positions of power, and they're there on television and they're saying, people, red lights are flashing, wake up, this is dangerous, this country is in danger. And it's coming from John Brennan. And not to mention doing away with voter rights and gerrymandering and all that, but let me just, because we have to be hopeful. There's every reason to be hopeful. Any of us who've been in this business of changing society as long as I have knows that people can so profoundly change. I'm one of them. I didn't even know where Vietnam was in 1968. You can change. People can flip, which is why it's so important to go door to door and talk to people and really listen to them. Because if you tell them something they don't know, rather than attacking Trump or Fox, they can change. But let me just give you one little story before I finish about why activism is so important. In Michigan, just the other day, there is this dude, he's running for Congress. He's a veteran, a Vietnam veteran, or Iraq, I guess it's, I don't know, he's a veteran. And the board that's in charge of the elections took his name off the ballot because you heard about this? Because they said that there were too many of the ballots that had a P.O. box number instead of addresses. So they just took him off the ballot, leaving his Republican opponent with no opponent. And so what happened? This is northern Michigan, the peninsulas. Michael Moore, of documentary fame, organized hundreds and hundreds of activists to do a write-in campaign. And this guy, what's his name? Matt Morgan. Over 30,000 people voted for him on the write-in campaign, and he's back on the ballot. So while we fight to end all this incarceration and reform our bail, which is going to be hard because clearly what they did was they're so powerful, the bail bond industry, that they added all these amendments that make it not possible to support anymore. We have to continue that fight, but we have to vote in November. We have to vote, and we have to bring everyone we know and anybody who has a hard time getting to the polls, drive them there, get them there. I'm 80 years old. I've seen a lot of elections. I have never, ever looked forward to an election as important as this one. And it's not just Congress and Senate. The people that are elected to the state legislatures November 6th are going to be the ones that decide about gerrymandering. You know? So when you vote, pay attention to the sheriff and the boards of supervisors and the state legislature and everything matters. So do your research and find out who is on our side, because most people are. And let me tell you something. I mean, one of the reasons I love that presentation, it was talking about unity, the importance of unity. Do you know what scares the powers that be more than anything else? is when working class white people get together with African Americans. Go to the African American Museum, the Smithsonian in Washington, and you'll see all the way back in the early 1600s, Nathaniel Bacon's revolt. Every time some white dude starts getting together with African Americans, oh my God, the rich are up in arms. It's the scariest thing of all. That's why Trump is pitting us against each other, okay? So we have to, white people have to put ourselves, we have to try to imagine what it's like to be a person of color in this country. I've been trying to do that since Trump was elected, to really understand on a level that I never have before. What does it feel like to be black? I'm telling you, if I was black, I'd have a machine gun and I'd kill everyone. That is like 100% off the record. I hate cell phones. Y'all are so patient. Bless you. Also strong. Also survivalists. Also resilient. We have a lot to learn. And one of the things we have to learn is from the black women in Alabama. Oh, yeah. Were they crazy about Doug Jones? No. What do they care about his white ass? But they knew that if they could get Doug Jones elected and get that predator out, that they would be flexing their muscles and showing the rest of the country how important the black vote is. Thank you.
Well, Jane Fonda is fantastic. She's always been a hero of mine. I loved what she had to say. The only thing that concerns me is that she's been watching Rachel Maddow and listening to these CIA and FBI guys like they're the last word. If I can convince her to come on my show, you can be sure I'm going to have a little talk with her about that, because those are the very same guys that are advising Facebook and Twitter who are censoring left-wing activists. So yes, this is an important election, but you know, for the last 40 years, we've had neoliberalism in this country under Democratic presidents as well as Republican presidents, and we have to be fighting capitalism and neoliberalism and not just crazy people like Trump. Thank you, and keep fighting, and share this stream, because yes, I am in Facebook jail again, and that's what Facebook is doing. It's censoring left-wing activists. That's why we have to support Alex Jones. I mean, not support Alex Jones. We hate Alex Jones, but we have to fight for the principle of free speech. And when corporations like Facebook are listening to neocon think tanks like the Atlantic Council with Henry Kissinger, Mike Morrell, Mike Hayden, and all these spooks on their board, and telling them what to censor, what is real news and what is fake news, we have a very dangerous situation. What we need to do is we need to regulate Facebook. 80% of people get their news from Facebook and Google, and they need to be heavily regulated like a monopoly utility that they are. I personally would like to see them nationalized, but that's not going to happen, so we have to fight to do this, and share this video, because they have put me in Facebook jail. This is the second time this month, and all I do is share my shows, okay? So there's no unprotected speech in my shows.